Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome everyone to the regular scheduled meeting of the Cass County Board of Commissioners. I'd like to have the school board of Cass County with us. I'd like to start the meeting off tonight with a moment of silent prayer. Bow your heads. Amen. I'd like to move on to the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. Pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Like to thank the school board for continuing on this month. And we'll move on to general updates. The first up is the board of education. I'd like to turn it over to Dr. Carter.
I'd like to call the Cass County Board of Education.
Well, thank you for having us. We have just some general information that we believe out some of it has already been heard by some of our earlier commissioners, but I think it would be a good time to share some of the same data. We've heard some of it as well, so I thought it would be a good time to touch on that. I won't take as long as I did earlier to go over it, but I can just want to put some of it points as well. And Ms. Bose, our elementary director, is sending out the copy that you can follow along with. And while she's doing that, I can go ahead and talk about a couple other things. We have a flyer that I'm so excited about that's coming out probably hopefully everywhere you go in the county. And this is from a grant that we received before COVID that we wrote in Stuns, to try to pursue strengthening the art programs in schools. You know, the research certainly shows that some students have a niche for the arts, and that certainly has alignment with critical thinking and educational opportunities. And so we are trying to pursue a substantial grant that will strengthen the arts program K-12 and then offer a lot of extensive programs in the Civic Center for our students, which is certainly something that branch out to the community as well. And with that initial grant, and the purpose of that grant was to hire someone to help us with the research. And so we were lucky enough to hire Amanda Hodges. I think we all know Amanda Hodges. And so she is helping us with this, this grant seeking data seeking opportunity. So this is our first informational session, and it will be on March 6th, and we'll have it all throughout the county. But what we're doing is gathering data. We'll have surveys. So with the data that we collect, hopefully we can support a very, as I said earlier, substantial grant from some different locations such as DRL. So we're very excited about what that can do for Cass County schools. So just wanted to let you know, if you see this flyer, we hope to get your information of how the arts can really strengthen instruction. And the other thing I wanted to share before we get into the academic progress is not long ago we received our audit from Anderson, Smith and White, and they presented to the Board of Education, and we had a very clear audit, no findings. And thank you to Mr. Peter, who we're contracting with, and our finance department and our Board of Education for all their work. And I have to say, this is the 4th year in a row we've had 0 findings in the audit. And so I'm just very excited about the sound financial position that the school district is in. So if anybody would like to see that, you're certainly welcome to as well. So with that being said, you have supposed to pass out an update, and you can see that this was dated back in October, and that was around the time that I did present it to the commissioners. But I promise you, I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through this entire packet earlier, so you've already heard it. But I did want to share where we are as a district. And, you know, of course, we're halfway through this year, so we're hoping to show, and we intend to show progress this year as well. But if you can just kind of quickly follow along through this, I can spin through it, and you're certainly welcome to ask questions if you like as well. And you know, it's no hidden agenda that it's been very public early on versus this year about how the pandemic did have an impact on education. But on page 3, I think this is important to say that the school performance, and I can explain what they're consisting of in a few minutes, but across the state of North Carolina, there's about 2,600 schools across North Carolina, public schools. The number of A's and B's and C's went down substantially. You can see that's a negative 293. So from 2019 before COVID to after COVID, there were 298 less schools receiving B's, 58 less schools receiving A's, and 138 less schools receiving C's. And so you can see the increase of B's and F's on the other side. We certainly don't have enough schools, but I just wanted to say how significant that is. But about half the schools in North Carolina, about 42% either received a B or an F on their school performance grade. And that's interesting. On page 4, you can see that 30% of economically disadvantaged students, only 30% of those meet the pre-college grade requirement. And that says a lot about early learning. And so that correlates to if you're in a district that's low wealth, it's more difficult for you to have scores that are proficient. And we have more data that shows that as well. And as you know, Castle County is a low wealth rural district. And so we have a significant percentage, somewhere between 60 to 80% of our students are economically disadvantaged. So that does have an impact on instruction, and that does play into early learning. And I know, I can tie that to the Leandro case as well. There's so many things that, support the need for rural low wealth districts and the report in early learning. So low wealth. When low wealth is your number of students, and they can it out, the number of students that receive free and reduced lunch. And so every year, we ask our students, their families, to provide information that our child nutrition department can support for free and reduced lunch. And we use that data to determine low wealth. And in a few minutes, you'll see some data on that in our schools as well. But a lot of families are proud and they don't submit reports and they don't submit the paperwork. So the number you see is on the low range, because we know there's many more than what submit paperwork free and reduced lunch. Now, this is where on page 5, I think this is a very important page to look at, and this pretty much sums everything I've said. On this chart, on page 5, if you look on the left-hand side, it says percent EDS, economically disadvantaged students, the students who have free and reduced lunch. It shows at the high school, BY is currently 41 to 60%. Well, we know that number's high because high schoolers have sometimes trouble turning in those papers, but we know all the numbers are low. But then you can see our other schools, our other 5 schools run in the 61 to 80% range. That means almost 80% of our students in our schools are low wealth on free and reduced lunch. Now, here's what's important to see the correlation. Up there, you can see the 0 to 20%. So if you look at that, that's the number of schools. So if you look at the number of schools who have 0 to 20% low wealth, free and reduced lunch students in their school, look to the right, see how many of those students scored A. 76 across the state of North Carolina, there were 76. 198 of those scored B, 67. But what's interesting, look how many of low wealth schools scored a D or an F. There were 0 Fs, 8 Ds across the state of North Carolina. But if you look down to the bottom, 61 to 80%, the higher low wealth percentages, how many of those schools scored an A across the state of North Carolina? 0. There were 0 schools across the state of North Carolina that had 61 to 80% free and reduced lunch, low wealth, economically disadvantaged that scored an A on their school report card. And only 3 schools across the state scored a B. The formula for school proficiency is not where it should be. And I'll get into that in just a minute too. And there were only 56 schools across the entire state of North Carolina in that range that scored a C. And North Elementary was one of those schools, one of those 56 schools. But you can see the bulk of schools across the state of North Carolina that scored, that have 61 to 80% free and reduced students, either scored a D or an F. And we follow the D. So are our schools low performing? Absolutely not. But they were designated that. And there's a big difference between being designated and being low performing. So the next page, you know, a lot of people say, oh, the district wasn't low performing, all your schools must be doing well. Well, if we had one school that was not in that designation, we wouldn't consider that district. And down below are some of our surrounding counties. For instance, Winston-Salem, they have 72 schools. If they had 2 other schools that were considered low performing, the entire district would be low performing. But that doesn't mean, and I should say designated as low performing. So what does a school grade look like? On the next page, on page 7, you know, school grades, and this is something that we hope will change next year with legislation. School grades are considered, are made up of two numbers, 80% proficiency and 20% grade. Well, 80% proficiency basically says everybody's going to score right here at this level. Doesn't matter if you're an AIG student, you might be up here. As long as you meet that level right there, you're good. Well, they really didn't grow, but they are in that range. If you're economically disadvantaged and you come to school without that reading comprehension, without that foundation of learning that a lot of students with higher wealth have before they enter the school, you know, you're already at a deficit. But but proficiency says it doesn't matter what you need to learn, you better score right here to be proficient. And we know that that's not feasible in some cases. And that's why a lot of the districts that are high poverty or high EDS have that difficulty meeting that proficiency level because the bar is set for everyone at the same level. Growth, on the other hand, says that we're taking every child wherever they're at, and we're going to grow them in years worth of work. So if you're coming to school at a deficit, as long as you get a year's worth of growth, you've met growth. If you're the AIG student up here, and you know this is the proficiency level, well, you've already met that. But we still want to grow that AIG student, so they have to be growth to show growth in the school. So it's obvious that growth is the most important element of the formula, but only 20% of that formula is based on growth and 80% on proficiency, making sure you reach those bars. So it's certainly become a hot topic across the state of North Carolina that the accountability model is not fair to all schools and all school districts. And so right now there is a big push to change that. And DPI, the state school board, have made it a goal of going across the state of North Carolina to seek input. And back in November, the timeline was that they would have the data collected and it would go to legislation in this past January. But they felt like they needed more data and more information. So they were hoping that in 6 months it will go for legislation. So I urge anyone that has any insight, any input, or with your legislators to please discuss the formula, because it does make a big difference of whether you're low wealth or not, because it's a direct correlation to low wealth. So on the next one, I wanted to share with you performance grades on page 8. I'm excited about this, even though it says the performance grade is D for C's. What I'm looking at are the greens and blues, because that's growth. And you can see back in 17-18, we only had 2 schools that met growth. That's concerning. That's very concerning. We put efforts in place. We put strategies in place. We hired curriculum coaches. We put programs in place. We did school audits. We did all sorts of things to make sure that we were aligning with the state standards and state curriculum. And so in 18-19, we had 4 schools meet at, 4 either meet or exceed growth, 3 met growth and 1 exceeded growth. And then of course COVID hit and there was a deficit in learning. But even with that deficit in learning, the next year, 21-22, we still grew. 5 of our 6 schools either met or exceeded growth. So when someone says is Caswell a low performing school, absolutely not. We're designated low performing because of the formula 2080, but our students grew. And it is amazing how they grew. And I'd like to commend our teachers and our principal and our curriculum staff, all of our staff for the work that they did to make this happen, because if you look from 17-18 to 21-22, there's a big change in student learning. And so I think that it's something to be commended over. And hopefully the formula will change that the grade aligns with the student progress. And on page 9, you could just see that if they change the formula from 2080 to 50-50, well, it's kind of growth 50%. We'd have all of our schools but one have a C, at least a C, and then the other school would be 2 points away from the C. So it's more fair, but of course that's dependent upon the legislation. And then if you can move on over page 11, it was just talking about the survey that state's taking, but that's already passed. On 12 and 13 and 14, those are our proficiency scores. And 15, those are our proficiency scores that I was talking about. I won't, the data is there for you to look at, but again, that's where the students met that bar. It says everybody's going to score right here. You can see we had a trajectory of going up, and when COVID hit, and like every other school district, our proficiency scores did go down. But if you go on page 19, growth is what with any educator, you're going to say, without a doubt, growth is the most important if you're looking at individual students. When you're looking at wherever they come into with, that they're going to grow that unit worth of growth at the end of the year. And on page 20, we drill down to subgroups, and you can see on the left-hand side all the subgroups of students in the state and Castle County. There's others, but of course the ones that we have in Castle. And if you will look as the subgroup, the state is in red. They do not meet the growth for those subgroups. But you can see at Stony Creek, South, Oakwood, North, and Dillard, we met growth in every subgroup of students, whether you were Asian, Black, Hispanic, white, economically disadvantaged, students with disabilities. We met growth. Those students grew a year's worth of growth. BY, we met 2 of their subgroups, and of course, our goal is for all students to grow. So this is something to be very proud of for our teachers. And then on page, the next page, page number on it, but this again is the growth that you can see from 16-17. We had no school in Castle meeting growth, not one. And then 21-22, all but one that growth. That's the CCS historical EBOS data growth. The EBOS is the model that the state goes with to calculate growth for students. And then the next ones, I won't keep too much of your time, but that drills down with reading, math, and science. It talks about growth and how it has grown for each of those subject areas that's tested. On 25, I'm very proud of this too, that our graduation cohort rate has, over the past almost 10 years, it went from 75.1 in 2014-15, and it's kind of gone up and down, but basically it's gone up, and 2021-22 is now at 83.1, and we want it to be in the 90s. But along with that, and that graduation cohort means that any student who enters 9th grade is going to graduate within 4 years. If we'd said this is a 5-year graduation cohort rate, it'd be much larger. But we want students to enter 9th grade and graduate on time. So that is a 4-year graduation cohort rate that we have. And not only are we graduating more students, the right side, the dropout rate trends, we are the lowest this county has ever been as many years as we went back dropping out. And that's a good thing. We want to keep our kids in school. And you can see back in 14-15, 4.46% of our students dropped out of school. I mean, that's something that we cannot have in the district. And we want students to graduate on time, stay in school and graduate on time to pursue their careers. And in 2021, we had the lowest rate ever that we could go back and find data on in this county. It's only 1.14% of our students dropped out of school. That's 1.14% too many, but it's the lowest, and it's lower than the state average. So that again is commendable to our teachers, our guidance counselors, our social workers, all of our staff that work with our students to stay in school. And then, of course, when we do our data dive, we certainly look on page 26 at our subgroups. And, it was really interesting to see our two highest graduation subgroups of those 83.1% were our females and our Black students. And so, and all of them were high. So we were very excited about that. On page 27, I think this is very interesting for our commissioners to see. On page 27, we did a comparison. We looked at broadband percentage, and of course, you can see the reference at the bottom. We looked to see at this time, last fall, I'm sure it's probably changed a little by now, but we pulled the lowest broadband service counties in North Carolina, and we ranked them. And you can see Anson had the lowest broadband in their county of 28.67% of broadband in their county. And Castle was only third from the bottom. It would only have a broadband at 33.5. I hope it's higher by that now, and hopefully it tell us that only 33.5% of the county was broadband when this report was written. And so you can see how it went up. But what we did was look at broadband, and then we looked to see if those counties are they high performing or low performing. And what's very interesting is the top 8 are all low performing. So there was a direct correlation too, with not only being low wealth and having that deficit of entering school, but also having that deficit of broadband too, because that was so important during COVID times as well. And you can see how that it does relate. Gates was an outlier, and if I was Gates, I'd be very excited about that. But you can see the range there, how it did impact learning. Now the next page drills it down a little bit. So we hear a lot about, you get so much first pupil funding, you have all this money. And there are funds that are available to us, and we do utilize them. We have low wealth, we have small schools, we have federal funding, and of course in that we have our state funding. And so all those together provide a per pupil funding. So if you took all of those top low wealth districts that lacked in broadband, and you looked at their per pupil funding on this, you can see that Castle has less per pupil funding than all of those. So when it's said that, Castle receives all this money, we receive the money, but it's not as much as other districts receive. And the next page on the right side, I wanted to share with you that I'm sure everyone in here knows or have heard of our associate's degree program. We started this program in 2017. And our first year of graduating students within the 2020-2021 school year. And that is a program that we developed in the Castle County Schools, and our course certainly supported it, and we're so excited about it, because what that does is offer our high school students an opportunity to graduate while they're in high school with a 2-year college degree free of charge. And there's things like early colleges and other partnerships with high schools that allow students to graduate with a high school with a 2-year associate's degree in 5 years. And some of them are all campus separate school systems or separate schools. This is allowing our students to stay at BY, play sports, do whatever they normally would do, but if they enter this pathway at BY, and it's a rigorous pathway, and it's in partnership with, we were very thankful that PCC wanted to partner with us on this when we gave them the idea that they can graduate in 4 years, and the day they graduate with their high school diploma, they will receive a 2-year college degree at the same time, free of charge to parents. And that is a gem for families in Castle County. And they can go to universities and be a junior. They can go to the workforce. They can do whatever they choose, but they have that 2-year associate's degree the minute they graduate from high school. And it has become so popular. You can see our numbers have increased. And this year you can see that we have 9, and then next year we have 10 enrollment, and we've already can see because of our new students that we have 26 on the projection for 2026. So very excited about that. And then the last thing I would go through, but these are the things, the strategies that we have in place this year to help strengthen our education. But I just, the overall is that our students are working well, our teachers are learning, our teachers are working hard. And we are doing a lot of things for learning and having. And yes, the state with a formula that does not work designates us as well as a lot of other school districts in North Carolina as performing. We are far from most of them. That's all that I have.
Thank you for the presentation, and I ask if any of the board members, Board of Education or the commission have any questions or comments.
I just have a couple questions, Dr. Cole.
Yes.
When graduation time comes, do y'all keep up with the number of kids that commit to college versus workforce?
Our counselors can keep up with a certain degree of it. There's been a lot of discussion at the State Department to expand that, and we're hoping that they allow us, but currently the only means we have is through if a student, when they graduate and they move on, if they or they're willing to come back and share that information. A lot of times students don't do that. That's all the data that we have, and our counselors try to keep up with it.
Right. Well, the reason I was asking, I don't know, I know when I was a big Y, we had a lot of trade classes. We
Yes.
had masonry, carpentry, auto mechanics,
Mhm.
because not every child graduates from BY or any high school is going to go on to college. A lot of them go into it. And is that something that, I know some of the classes over the years are kind of automatically there. Is that something that the school is looking at?
Absolutely. We've started several new classes. You have to have a broad band of opportunities. And that's one of the reasons we're pursuing the arts, because a lot of students, aren't, they can't find their niche in either the trade or they can't find it in the pathway of associates. So we're looking to bring in another avenue as well. But as far as the trade, absolutely. We have a new drone course that is, has, I guess, high numbers in every class that I've heard of. And that's, drone technology, but we also have auto mechanics, we have woodworking, and we are in the process, I'll go ahead and share, that bring masonry back. To as
I was
well.
gonna hit on that, because I'll be on a figure right now, Kevin, trying to find some.
Oh, absolutely.
And it is a good,
Good profession, good profession. So we are looking at that as well. CPE, as you well know, has a certain cap on the money that you have. And so you have to divide it between your interest. And that is certainly an area that we've already looked at for interest that we're trying to bring back. Oh, yes, thank you, Ms. Garland. Culinary arts, yes. The new high school has its own culinary kitchen in it, separate from the cafeteria kitchen. But we have a culinary kitchen that has state arts. Amazing. In fact, I would welcome anybody who wants to tour the high school. Let me give you the tour so that you can see it for yourself. The words cannot describe how wonderful that room is. And students that have seen it, because it's the last piece of the construction of the high school, because there was a few pieces. I think it was the walk-in freezer that is not in yet because of delays in delivery. But as soon as that's in, we should open that up, and it will be for the office will be when it opens up the culinary classes. There's so many things we want to offer that. We have a dance studio now that we've had dance, but now we have a dance studio with the mirrors and handrails, everything. And at open house, our students that had just graduated, we're telling the new students that it's not fair that you have this. And so it was amazing. We have music production classroom, film production, and we have a maker space. We have, there's so many opportunities right now for our students. We have art, the arts. Have I missed any, Ms. Garland? Oh, yeah. Carol's doing amazing things with the arts, and so that's one of the contacts we have with expanding with the arts too. But it's just, there's a lot of opportunities now. And I say the kids seem very excited about it. We are too. Thank you.
I got a question. Dr. Carter, on page 28, why is our per pupil spending so much lower of what we get from the state than the other counties listed on that page.
And then some of it's on your ADM, so this is not your ADM as well. When the district here, you may want to,
So I think,
with that as well.
right, and looking at that figure, it's a collection of funding sources where it's a culmination of state, local, and federal dollars. The state funding looks at your size. It also looks at the socioeconomic status of the county. So they look at variables such as your property tax base, the average income of people that live in the county, to try to skew that. And I would say, in the case of Caswell, it's very state dependent, right? So I think it gets a good reliable share of state. And I think often the shortcoming, and no agenda, right, but often the shortcoming for Caswell has been sort of the local portion of that pie.
If I may, Mr. Peter, Jim Peter, was our CFO, Chief Finance Officer for a few years. And then now we have a vacant position that we're contacting with Mr. Peter and SOS, the company we fund and partners with. And they are helping us with our finances until we hire a CFO. And so he is a big piece of the reason that we have 4 years clean audits and findings. Thank you, Ms. Smith. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Not, we'll move on to the board of commissioners update. No.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congratulations on your audit. I would like a copy of that. I haven't seen one in a year or two. The county has struggled a little bit with our audit process in the last year or so. As you may know, we implemented a new software system, and the conversion didn't go exactly as we hoped. So we're trying to work our way through it. We also have we're working with the consultant CPA company, and we're working with the NCAC as well. And our recent meetings with those folks have led us to believe that we should have some things very quickly. But if you don't mind, I would like to.
Absolutely.
That's number one. I'm happy to talk about broadband a little bit. You brought it up in your meeting. Since Spectrum started building out the RDOF program, they were the largest awardee federal funding within the county. They completed about 2,000 passings, and a passing is an address. So our numbers should have grown. I think our numbers are about 10,500 addresses in the county. So 2,000 addresses is substantial. They plan to turn on 3 additional nodes before the end of the month. A node is 265 addresses, so 795 more passings completed before the end of February. So that'll put us to about 2,800. I expect them to finish their build in Castle by summer if we have dry weather. So that's RDOF. The Rural Digital Opportunity Fund. It was a federally funded grant program that worked in conjunction with the internet service providers. I'm happy to answer any questions you have about RDOF and then move on to Great Grant.
Yeah. Okay. Good.
So is the whole county not Spectrum not available to everybody?
No. It's so if you Google RDOF winning bids, you get a link, you go to that link, and it pulls up kind of like a GIS website. Up in the top left-hand corner, there's a little eyeball that says winning bids or something. You have to click on that to populate it, brings up everything. And it gives you a snapshot of the whole nation as far as who won what. You can zoom in on Caswell County and you can see the area covered in green is Spectrum. the area covered in red is Starling. So there's a couple of red areas, but the majority, I would say a third of the county is probably a third of the county is going to be covered by spectrum. And I'll just reiterate, this is fiber to the home. This is not wireless. This is not it's fiber to the home.
Is Spectrum the only one installing now?
Yes.
What percent do you say they have already done?
I don't really have a percentage of what they've completed at this point. I would say, and I'm guessing, so don't hold me to this number. But I would guess without the 3 additional nodes turned on, I would say there's somewhere around 55–60%. There are some there's some technical legal things that they're having to work through with CenturyLink. CenturyLink, so they offer phone service, they offer broadband internet, and TV service. For phone service, they have to work through an agreement with CenturyLink to where if somebody decides to switch, CenturyLink can relinquish the phone numbers to Spectrum, and that's causing a little bit of an issue in the northwest part of the county. There's about 700 addresses being called up, well, maybe not 700 Caswell, but 700 addresses total between Rockingham and Caswell that's being called up, and there's some delays getting that paperwork. So
What is the projected year that you might have 100% broadband?
can I get to that in a minute? Okay. Any other questions on RDOF? Okay,
I don't have a question, I have a statement. You need to make sure that everybody knows when they call Spectrum, and I'm speaking from experience. They will only do one site evaluation for 365 days. So if you call them to come out to your house to see if you can get Spectrum and say, they're like, no, you can't for some crazy reason. My reasoning was because my address was not right, they looked. They won't come back out and will offer you service for 365 days.
if you run into issues like that, call me. I'm happy to. Yeah, I know. We just never really, we never got back together. But I'm happy to help work through those kind of issues and be a conduit for you and for any residents that you know of Caswell County that's working through those type of issues.
Just a follow. The road I live on is parallel to 86. No. It's Comcast.
Mhm.
Does that mean that Comcast has exclusive rights?
No,
Okay, that's what I don't understand.
okay, so you remember back when the phone companies formed these agreements that, okay, this is my territory, this is your territory, and never the two shall meet, right? Well, that's not the case with broadband. That's one of the things that's holding up this number swap with CenturyLink and Spectrum right now in the northwest part of the county. So no, nothing is exclusive when it comes to broadband like that at all. Comcast, the furthest south Comcast comes in the nation is Yancey.
Right.
So Comcast, they didn't even reply to the North Carolina survey saying, hey, do you provide service in this area? They didn't even reply to it. So what we're seeing is we're seeing a lot of the areas that are covered in Comcast, by Comcast, they're going to see a duplicate service provider provide service to those residents. Anything else on RDOF? Okay, we'll move on to the GREAT grant. So the GREAT grant is a state grant. And you may remember several years ago, we received about 1.5, I think it was about a $1.5 million GREAT grant award. And I told everybody then I said, you've got to be cautious about talking about this. You can be optimistic, but be cautious. And sure enough, that grant, the internet service provider ended up not being able to provide the service through the great grant. So we went through a whole process and we rebid it out. And when we rebid it out, this RDOF federal grant was out there. So the internet service provider that won the second round of our $1.5 million, they were kind of leery about starting because they were going to do wireless service to folks in the county. Then the RDOF announcement came and they realized, fiber to the home is in the same areas we're going to be providing wireless. And they said, no, thank you. We can't compete with that. We can't compete with fiber to the home. So they backed out of it. So we still have $1.5 million sitting out there that NCDIT doesn't really know how to deal with. The good news is, though, is that we've received another $4 million in great grant funding. That great grant funding went to an internet service provider called Zytel, Z-I-T-E-L, just like it sounds. They're a company out of Montier, Virginia. They provide fiber to the home. Their build out window from the date the contracts are assigned is 2 years. They have 2 years to build out that network. The way I've described Yanceyville, or the way I've described Zytel, is anything not covered by Spectrum that's north of Yanceyville will more than likely be covered by Zytel. So you may see some of those duplicate addresses. I know Walters Mill Road is covered by Comcast.
Right.
I also know they won those addresses. Zytel won those addresses as well. So we may see a lot of that occurring in Yanceyville North. They have between 2,000 and 3,000 addresses that Zytel will be on the hook to provide service to. So that'll move us up to about 7,000 addresses within the county out of the 10,500 that have service. The state did a much better job, and part of it was because of the pressure put on them by us through having to rebid the first great grant. They did a much better job, we believe, this time in vetting the contractors that won great grant awards. So we're hopeful we won't have the same problems again that we did last time. What questions do you have about great grant?
Is there a map that is available that residents can look to see what they have in their area?
Not for great grant. Well, North Carolina, maybe. Let me email you. There's an NC North Carolina map that DIT puts out. I'll email that to you and you can email it out to your folks. And Carl, I'll get that to you and we can get it out to the board. Any other questions on great grant?
Mr. Miller, will Zytel start after Spectrum is finished, or would they be working in conjunction while?
They could be working the same time.
The same thing with battle then. Comcast, I'm gonna move over and Comcast won't come back, so.
Yeah, Comcast is not going to expand any further in North Carolina than they already do. They're just not interested in providing additional service. So, so that'll leave us with, I don't know, 2,000 to 3,000 addresses that still need coverage. There's another. They have a 2-year build out window. There will be contract going before the Board of Commissioners. It's a 3-party contract because the Board of Commissioners committed to providing and partnering with the great grant, specifically because you receive, the internet service provider receive more points on their application if we provided a match, a matching funds of some kind. So we use part of our ARPA dollars, right? We use that to provide up to a $250,000 match. So there's a three-party contract that the state has just put out that the internet service provider needs to sign, we need to sign, and then it goes back to the state and the state signs. After that contract's fully executed, that's when Zytel can begin. I have spoken to Rodney Gray, the CEO of Zytel. He said they're itching to get started. They're ready to start laying cable and fiber in Castle. So hopefully that starts right away, but truthfully, they have a 2-year build out window. The Rural Digital Opportunity Fund had a 6-year build out window, but they decided to start with Castle. So Castle was one of the first counties in the nation that Spectrum started to build out. So I think we're fortunate in that regard. So after the Great Grant, there's another state funding program coming out, and it's called CAB, Completing Access to Broadband. And the counties will have, the Board of Commissioners will have a little bit more control over how that looks and how that feels. And I think we'll have about $4 million from the state to move forward with for CAB. So we'll actually get to choose the addresses that are involved in CAB and then ask internet service providers to bid on those addresses. So realistically, we put every address that's not covered under RDOF or GRADE in there and let internet service providers bid on it. Now it makes sense if you're in one of the Spectrum areas, you know, right off to the side, the Spectrum would want to cover that. Same thing with Zytel. So we expect them to Spectrum and Zytel to apply for that funding, you know, and hopefully expand their footprint with that. The state hadn't written the rules for that. That's about as much as I know about CAB, and I'm not, you got anything there? I'm not exactly sure how that's going to look and feel, but that's what we've been told will happen. Then after that, there's one more program, and you remember the name of it? We call it last stop. I call it the last mile.
Last mile, last stop.
So, you know, there's always that one road that there's no easement, and there's one house down at the end of it, and it's 3/4 of a mile, and they want to charge $6,000 to get down to that road. The last mile is funding to traverse down that road and cover that for the internet service providers. But what they have to do is the individual resident has to call the service provider, and then the service provider has to contact the state and work with the state to get that done. So the Board of Commissioners said, hey, Mr. Manager, why don't you form something when that program is up and running and help be a liaison between our residents and the internet service providers in the state. So we're going to do that. So what questions about broadband? What other questions? I'm happy just to say that I serve on, I feel very honored and privileged to serve on the North Carolina Association of County Commissioners, President of Broadband Task Force Initiative. There's, I think, 14 members. I'm one of 3 staff positions, staff level positions. The rest of the folks on the committee are county commissioners. So I feel very fortunate to be serving on that committee. We get a lot of good information. We're able to make a lot of recommendations to the state and to the NCACC for the NCACC to advocate for. So I'm always happy to hear about broadband, especially when I can take that information and relate it to the state. So do you have any other questions for me? Otherwise, I'm happy to answer anything, any questions you have. About anything.
Is the one that we are most, concerned with because it's directly aligned with construction.
Well, I can tell you this, it's what our residents are most concerned with right now too. I receive 10 to 12 calls or emails a week about broadband. And it's something that's incredibly needed within the county. I'm really excited Spectrum has jumped on this, from the get-go, and hopefully, I believe they'll be finished by June, July, August at the latest, with their build out, and that'll be a third of the county that didn't have broadband service before that does have it now. So I am scheduled for another broadband meeting on tentatively on May 2nd. And I'm happy to have a phone conversation with you after that meeting, or if you want to come to the meeting, that would be great. Okay. That's all I got, Mr. Chairman.
Next up is scheduling our next joint meeting. And I had a date floated of May 15th for a joint meeting at 6:30 that night. How does that look as far as the Board of Education? Is there a regular scheduled meeting day for that May 15th time slot? Yeah. Let's set that up for May 15th, 6:30 for the next joint meeting between the boards.
Yeah, we'll host, right?
Yeah, that,
I got it. 6:30. When will you start your budget process?
the forms are out to the department heads now. They're collecting information. They're going to come back to us very quickly. And we're going to compile the budget. We'll start working with the commissioners probably within the next 3 weeks.
Now, do you send us one like that, or we just do capital outlay?
No, y'all, the Board of Education just sends us their request.
Okay.
And we'll add it to, and there's just some statutory requirements about when you're supposed to send it. And the Board of Education always does a great job and gets us to it to us before that deadline. So
Just one question, quick question. On some matters. If we meet at 6:30, could we do maybe 5:30 for dinner? So we stretch too long?
Yeah.
Okay.
There any other comments, questions that you'd like to for the board? If not, I'll call a brief recess so we can get started on the next item.
You gone?
Board of Education adjourned.
Second one, that's another discussion. All in favor, raise your hand. Opposed, likewise. Thank you, Joe. Thank you.
Thank you all for hosting us and thank you for the delicious.
I'd like to call the meeting back to order. The next item up on the agenda is the insurance rate increase for the health insurance provided by the county.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioners, I've given you 7 different options tonight in the paperwork you have here. Many of these options, 4 of these options were emailed out to you earlier this week in the agenda packet. I've got to reviewing and analyzing some of the data that was provided to you in your agenda packet. And I come to the realization that I believe we've been looking at this issue in the wrong way. Because we've been focused on what the employee is going to pay. And I think that's the wrong way, and I can show you why. If you look at the top page, you'll see for the employee only, the amount, the county contribution is $673.69. You look at the employee spouse, it's $696.70. And it goes to employee family, it's $709.05. So you've got, for separate employees, you've got separate rates that the county is willing to pay for their insurance. In years past, the county paid one rate, $651.76. And that's what the county paid for each employee only, for employee spouse, and the employee picked up the remaining balance. So to be more equitable and fair and not provide one employee with a greater benefit than another employee, I think it's better for us to look at how much the county is willing to pay rather than how much the employee needs to pay. So if you'll move over to option 2 is the same way as option 1, different numbers, but the same way. Option 3 is the same way, where it provides different benefit amounts. But when you get to option 4, you can see that if the employee covers, here again, we're talking about what the county contribution. If we say, okay, the employee is going to cover all of the premium, then you see $651.76, and it's $651.76 for every tier level for both the base plan and the buyout plan. So every county employee is given the same benefit amount, right? Well, if you turn over to option number 5, and you say, okay, the county will contribute $20 more per employee per month. Then that puts the employee paying $16.93, and the rest of for employee only coverage on the base plan, and that's what we need to base everything off of. And then any other increases incurred are picked up by the employee. Switch over to the next page. Option number 6 is the county increasing their monthly payment by $15 instead of $20 as you previously saw. That means the county contribution is going to be $666.76. The employee cost would be $21.93. Then option number 7 is the county paying $10 more a month per employee. And you can see $661.76 as opposed to what we currently pay, $551.76. But every employee is receiving the same benefit amount rather than different benefits amounts in options 1, 2, and 3. I'm happy to answer any questions about the options for you that you may have.
Question, Mr. Miller.
Yes, sir.
It's okay, Mr. Chairman. Go ahead. Next
Yes,
question.
sir.
Now, or is the county paying varying amounts?
No.
Each employee receives the same.
Currently, right now, each employee receives $651.76.
Okay.
That is shown and option 4. So in option 4, what you're saying is, yeah, us as a county, we're not going to cover it anymore. We're going to continue paying the $651.76, and that's all we're going to pay.
So that option 4 is cost neutral. That's what the county is currently paying out for the insurance plan. And it increase when it goes back to
The employee would pick up 100%. Yes.
All right, on option 5, what is the cost to the county of a $20 increase? What does that come out to?
Total.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see. Option 5. So if you look at option 5, the county would pick up an additional $60,720.
Okay, if you go to option 6 and give me the same number, then option 7 as well.
Option 6 is $45,540. Option 7 is $30,360.
That number for option 6 again.
Option 6. $45,540. What is option 1? I would really ask the board not to approve option 1, specifically because it provides these varying benefit amounts to different employees. Now, if you wanted to provide, if the county wanted to pick up all of the increase for the employee-only coverage, then the county would pay $673.69, and the cost to the county would be $66,579.50. And that would be as close as the county could come to picking up 100% of the cost for employee only.
That's just before we all pass.
That's correct. Now the increases, employee spouse, those rates are going to increase more than an employee only policy, right? So the employee would then end up picking up the increase in employee spouse, that anything over the $673.69, the employee would end up covering the difference.
Same way with family coverage.
Yes, employee spouse, employee child, employee children, and employee family.
Picking up all of the employee on is 52,000.
Yeah, and I really think that's the fairest option for county employees. That means the Board of Commissioners is paying the same rate for me and I have employee child. So you're paying the same rate as for my benefits as you are for Melissa's, and Melissa may have employee only, and Jennifer may have employee family or family coverage.
But each employee will receive the same.
Each employee receives the same amount of money to cover their health insurance premium.
Now that's 66,579 number. That's the total amount of the premium increase, correct?
Well, when you do it like I've explained, that's the total amount of the premium increase. Now, actually, there's an additional $4,000. If you do it like that, there's an additional $4,000. I think it's $70,520 is the total premium increase. But regardless of what you do, regardless of what choice you make, the employee spouse, employee child, employee children, and employee family, they're going to cover that rest of it, regardless of what choice you make. So the max the county can pay is $66,580. And everybody else is gonna cover that additional 40,000 or $4,000.
Comments? Questions, anyone on the board? Well,
We tell the employees all the time, and it's true. It's hard for us to compete with the Norman County, when it comes to a lot of things. I feel like that this would be one way of showing them that we hear them, we do care. When we can do something. I would make a motion that we take on the 66,579, increase the employee on.
we got a motion, second. Well, got a second, but we still have discussion on the floor. Okay. Sorry.
What was the percentage of the last pay? They have a pretty large pay increases for my time last year, right?
They had, I'm sorry,
Probably.
there was a pay and grade classification study. And the commissioners agreed to pay 90% of the minimum or 7%, whichever was greater.
It was a 7% raise.
A minimum of a 7% raise.
This was not discussed. If insurance goes up, that wouldn't be part of taking first.
No, the pay increase, the 7% pay increase, minimum was based off of inflation, the inflation rate. The inflation rate was a little over 7% at that time, but it was based off.
Insurance be part of inflation.
Pardon?
Insurance isn't that part of inflation? Kind of like fuel going up, merchants going up.
Yeah, Mr. Miller, the 66,579.50. And I think that's Mr. Rose's motion. Am I correct?
Mhm.
That's the motion on the floor right now, to cover the full amount.
Yes, sir.
That premium is due when? I know we had to make a decision by March 1. I mean,
Right, that doesn't go into effect until July.
as far as budgeting, is it
That's next year's budget.
this 66 is in the 23-24 budget?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
Well, it'll be put in the 23 budget if that's what you decide.
Correct, but it's not a budget amendment for this fiscal
No,
year. And you and I have had this discussion prior to tonight, Mr. Miller. And this will not, if an employee was thinking about leaving, this will not make them stay this amount of money, or will it? I'm asking your opinion.
I'll give you my opinion. If you're ready for my opinion. Commissioner, I'll be just as plainly honest with you as I can. This is one of those situations where you can't win. I'll be 100% honest. Because if you do this from the employee standpoint, it was something you should have done and you were expected to do. If you don't do it, I think the employees are going to feel like the board doesn't respect the employees, respect what they do, and doesn't appreciate the employee base. So I really think this is a catch-22 and you can't win. You're not going to get kudos for doing it, is what I'm trying to say.
Has the county customarily always absorbed all of the increase of the cost of insurance?
Yeah, the only caveat to that was maybe 2 years ago when they implemented the $15 increase. The $15 payment period. Before that, they covered 100% of employee only and just employee only.
So basically, the board has become a victim of its own willingness to pay for it, and now it's expected that anytime an increase comes up, that the county's gonna absorb that.
Next year, this time, we'll be doing the same thing again.
We're gonna have the same conversation next year, I can guarantee you that. Yeah, insurance premiums are going to continue to rise. What I can tell you is insurance premiums will rise between 7.5% and 10% in North Carolina. Blue Cross Blue Shield announced 7.2% increase among their groups. We're at 3.3. Our employees are doing a pretty good job. Either they're doing a pretty good job managing their healthcare, or they're doing a horrible job managing their healthcare and not going to the doctor. So one of the two things is occurring,
Or a combination there.
or maybe even a combination.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I ran as a conservative, and I am fiscal conservative as well as some other areas that may be a little too conservative, some folks take. But having said that, as Mr. Rose has stated, you know, I know that we don't have the money, so to speak. But we cannot afford to pay what other counties pay their employees. And this is kind of hopefully a signal to county employees that we're trying to do something.
More discussion?
Which one was the motion? Option one,
No, it's coming a full amount, 66.
that's option one.
Is that, well, let me stop for just a second. Mr. Miller, this 66, if we approve that, is that treating all employees equal?
Yes, sir. That's giving each employee $673.69 towards their health insurance premiums. That would move the employee only, the employee cost would be $15.
Okay.
Remaining $15. The county contribution would be $673.69.
Okay,
And the total premium would be $688.69 for employee only.
so it's close to the option 5 version. Option 5 was a $20 county increase.
Yeah, it's $1.93.
$9.93 less than what we would have to pay a month.
Right, yeah.
Gentlemen? I've been waiting to throw my comments out there until I let everyone else have a chance. My only concern in doing this is continuing to rubber stamp all the increases in the county employees, expecting the county to always absorb. Is there any will on this board to pass part of the increase on to the county employees to send a message that that's not going to be possible to continue doing that all indefinitely to the future?
I'm going on with that. Because I know we're talking a year from now, it's gonna be sitting here doing the same thing again. And I know my insurance is $800 a month. It's gonna feel swallowed.
Mine's running over $1,000 some dollars a month myself. And it's only getting worse.
Let me ask you this, Mr. Miller, could you communicate this sake of this conversation? If this board approves what's been, the motion that's been made, you communicate to the county employees that these insurance premiums continue to rise, the county will not be able to absorb it all in future years.
I can.
Here's the one thing I'm getting from the general, my constituents. Is, everybody, it's not, they don't appreciate the county employees. They're like, you're taking it from me to give it to them. And mine's going up. That's what you're saying. I don't know how many people already said that. So it's not just, oh, if I vote no against this, I got the county mad at me. I got a whole lot of people out there mad at me, this struggle. So, I'm kind of putting a rock in a hard place there. Which people am I supposed to not make mad here?
I would prefer to see an option where the county employees absorb part of the cost. I don't see said option as one of the ones here laid out, like, I see one that costs 30,000, I see one that costs 45, one that costs 60, one that costs 70. But we had talked about a less increase of the premiums in the last meeting. I think even at one point, Commissioner yeah, option two, $5 increase. I think Commissioner Yarborough was talking about that as floating an idea. And I think Commissioner Jeffries had floated, the county paying half and the county employees paying half. But I don't really see per se one in the new option 4-7 that would even reflect that if I wanted to make a motion.
Well, if you look at option number 6, that's the county paying or the employee paying an additional $6.93 per month. So that would be the county absorbing or the employee absorbing, the county taking on part of that cost. If you look at option number 7, that jumps to $26.93. So the employee would be absorbing $16, an additional $10.93. That option 7 is an option that's as close to a 50-50 split as you can get. An actual 50-50 split the county would pay $11 per employee, an additional $11 per employee.
So what does that actually do? Am I overlooking what they're currently paying versus what this option 7 would have been paying?
So
Employee only is going to be $26.93, and then on down the list, what are they currently paying?
$26.93 above what they're paying now.
no, they're currently paying $15. So their total amount would be $26.93. So the additional would be $11.93 additional for the employee to pay in option number 7.
How about for the employee spouse? Once you refigure these numbers here, what are they currently paying, and what are they currently paying versus what they would be? I see $749.37. What are they currently paying?
For employee spouse,
Those prices are listed on option 1 is if the county covers
Yeah.
all the premiums. Option 1 shows what we actually pay. The employee spouse, all those numbers on option 1.
no, I think you're asking, okay.
Well,
He asks what we're paying now.
I think I see what you're saying. Okay, so currently they're paying $714 and be paying $749 for the employee spouse. Currently, they're paying the employee child $435, it would go to $461, which is what, $20-some more a month. Employee with children, $920, they are paying currently $880, so that's another $40. Employee family, $1,089, and it'll go to $1,137. Gentlemen, I'm gonna make a motion, a competing motion. I think a
Mr.
motion.
Chairman, Mr. Chairman,
Yes,
I don't
sir.
believe you can do that,
Okay,
because you got a motion on the floor.
okay, all right.
You got to dispose of that motion.
Motion can.
Well, that motion was made before the discussion was actually ended on the topic, so what's the rules of procedure?
The rules of procedure or Robert's Rules of Orders, if you've got a motion and a second on the floor, you have to dispose of that motion before another motion can be made.
Okay, all right. Well, we have a motion and a second on the floor. And that is for the county to absorb all the costs of the insurance. And which option was that, Mr. Lewis? That number 4?
Well, actually, that's not an option. That's not an option that you have listed. It's the county paying $673.69 per employee.
What was the motion to vote on? What option was that? That was before we had the 4,002.
I believe Mr. Chairman, it's an increase of 66,579.50.
That's what I saw.
Okay, that was before that other report was that.
That's the employee on.
So,
So where does the 401 come? Is that added on?
no, that's the 66,579.50. Mr. Rhodes.
Explain that other $4,000.
So the other $4,000 is will be picked up by the employees who have employee spouse, employee child, employee children, and employee family.
Okay.
Because those increase at a higher rate than just an employee only policy would. So an employee only policy might only increase $21.93, and an employee spouse policy might increase $45. So the difference in that, the employee is going to pick up for that policy. So that's where the extra $4,000 comes from. And- No,
What?
no,
You got something
No.
to clarify the?
that's all, that's really all I got.
Okay, so we are now at the point, we got a motion and a second on the floor for option 4. Correct. And saying that it was 66,579.50 for the county. To pay that amount. No?
That's not option 4.
That's not an option for, that's not an option.
It's that the motion is kind of a hybrid of option 5. Option 5 employee cost, employee only will be $16.93, but Mr. Rose's motion would bring that number down to $15.
Don't
I
take
believe
the
you're right.
$1.93 off of it.
Yeah, I think that's right. Because that option would have cost $60,720. You correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Miller, I believe I.
No, you're exactly right.
Okay.
And it's a hybrid of option 5, I guess you'd say.
That's the county absorbing the whole amount.
Yeah, county taking it on.
Okay. We have an option on, option 5 at $60,720 cost to the county. We have a motion on the floor and a second. We'll do a roll call vote. And start with
I
the
ju-
left and come down to. the
Just
right.
for clarity, repeat that one more time.
We had a motion on the floor. Made by Commissioner Rhodes and seconded by Commissioner Jeffrey. For option 5 at a cost of $60,720. That's not.
It's 66,000.
Okay.
66,500.
Carla, do you have a motion?
The motion was for the county to take on the $66,579.50, which is $673.69 per employee, and the employee cost will remain $15.
That's the figure that I said the first time, and I was told that was wrong.
And that's the motion.
Okay, all right. We'll try this one more time. The motion on the floor is for the county to absorb $66,579.50 of the cost to the county employees' health insurance plan. There is a motion and a second on the floor. We will vote on this option now by roll call vote. Anyone that is in favor, yay. Anyone that's opposed, likewise. No. I'll start from the left. Here, Mr. Jeffries.
Yes.
Mr. McVeigh. Aye. Mr. Rhodes. Aye. Mr. Holt.
Aye.
Mr. Yarborough.
Aye.
Mr. Dickinson is no. The motion passed. Right. Moving on to announcements and upcoming events. Our next commissioners meeting will be March 6th at 6:30. March 8th, 2023, there will be a tri-county meeting with Rockingham and Stokes counties at 6:30 at the Governmental Center in Wentworth, North Carolina. Are there any commissioner comments or any questions anyone would like to bring up before we go to the next item on the agenda? If there is none, the next item up is for consideration of a closed session. Do we have a motion to go into closed session? No motion and a second. Okay. Closed session to consider the qualification, competence, performance, character, fitness, conditions of appointment, or condition of initial appointment of an individual public officer, employee, or prospective public officer, employee. NCGS 143-381186. Have a motion and a second. All those in favor going into closed session? Say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? We now sit in closed session.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion since we're back in open session to adjourn.
Second. All those in favor of adjournment?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. We are adjourned.
Good job.